record. Okay, so we're just about ready to begin. Thank you for joining. We are thinking about the second portion in the book of Deuteronomy, and where Moshe is repeating some of the most important principles of the Torah. Now, we're in the book of Deuteronomy, so there's not a lot of stories. There's some because he's repeating, but this parsha, the portion of Vaeschanan, which we're about to read, I think, certainly from the Kabbalistic perspective, has some of the most important principles of Judaism and Jewish philosophy within the parsha. So first of all, Moshe repeats the 10 Commandments. 10 Commandments is obviously fundamental to the Torah. We also read the Shema, the most important Jewish prayer, the most important Jewish declaration. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. And we also get a description of what happens at Sinai from the voice of Moshe, because again, it's Deuteronomy, as we discussed last week. It's Moshe speaking in his own voice. So there's a tremendous amount to unpack and to delve into, and some of it we've done in the past, and I hope to offer some new insight this year as well. So the journey begins. I'm going to start by just reading from Chabad.org. I'll share it on the screen by reading the Parsha in a nutshell, and then we will be able to get the short version of the Parsha, and then we could delve into some of the details. So Vaeschanan. Vaeschanan is a fancy word. It means not only I prayed, but I implored. And it refers to the opening statement of the Parsha where Moshe really wants to go into the land of Israel, and he keeps asking God, and God keeps asking him to please stop asking, because God doesn't want him to ask, because God does not want him to enter the land of Israel. So there's a lot about that, but for the time being, we're just going to read the overview. So here we go. Moses tells the people of Israel how he implored God to allow him to enter the land of Israel, but God refused, instructing him instead to ascend the mountain and see the promised land. So while Moshe cannot enter, he can climb the mountain and see the promised land. Okay, continuing the review of the Torah. Moses describes the exodus from Egypt and the giving of the Torah, declaring them unprecedented events in human history. And these are quotes from the Parsha. Has there ever occurred this great thing, or has the likes of it ever been heard? Did ever a people hear the voice of God speaking out of the midst of the fire and live? You were shown to know that the Lord is God. There is none else beside him. Okay, I don't know if that's a perfect translation, but okay. Moses predicts that in the future generations, the people will turn away from God, worship idols, and be exiled from their land and scattered among the nations. But from there, in other words, from the dispersion, they will seek God and return to obey his commandments. Our Parsha also includes a repetition of the 10 Commandments and the verses of the Shema, which declare the fundamentals of the Jewish faith: the unity of God. Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. The mitzvah to love God, to study the Torah, and to bind these words, the tefillin, on our arms and heads, and inscribe them in the mezuzot, which literally means the doorposts, but it's the scroll that we affix on the doorposts, affixed on the doorposts of our homes. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the story in a nutshell. And now we could start thinking about unpacking some of the details of the Parsha. If anybody has any preference to speak about something specific, let me know. Otherwise, we'll just see how this develops. I'm just thinking that perhaps it's best to begin from the end, because I want to talk about something that I don't believe I have spoken about in the past. So I think we'll start from the end and then we'll work our way backward. And of course, I'm referring to the Shema. And it's good to talk about the Shema because the Shema is a very important aspect of Judaism. So in this book, it's 973, the Shema. And it includes many philosophical, but also practical principles of Judaism. One of the things, every year we do the family service on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur for the kids. And I asked the children, most children know the Shema, and I asked the children how many commandments do they think is in this very short paragraph of the Shema? Most people say 1 or 2 or 3, but if you think about it, there's many more commandments. Shema, believe in the unity of God, love the Lord, speak the words of Torah, say the Shema in the morning and at night. I'm already at 5. Hand tefillin and head tefillin, I'm already at 7. And mezuzah, I'm already at 8. Well, it's possible that the Shema is really 1, not 2. I don't remember if it's 1 mitzvah or 2 mitzvah. I think it's 1 mitzvah. Yeah, 1 mitzvah to read the Shema twice. So we have 7 very important and fundamental mitzvahs within the Shema. And each one is an important principle, and we can elaborate it from many different dimensions. What I want to talk about this year that I don't think I've spoke about in the past is the tefillin. And we'll talk a little bit about the technicalities of the tefillin, again, derived from this week's parsha, from the wording of the parsha, and from the semantics and from the law. We're going to try to get to the Kabbalistic meaning, and what are these words and these laws reflecting about a deeper truth within our soul and within our heart. So that's the roadmap. So in the beginning, for the next few minutes, I'm going to bore you with technicality, with some specific laws that seem to be a little bit abstract, but if you stick around long enough, you'll see that every law, what may seem to be a technical law in the Torah, every law has tremendous amount of layers and significance on multiple levels, both psychological and spiritual and philosophical. So stick around, please. Okay, so here we go. We're going to talk about the tefillin. So the first thing we want to think about the tefillin is people may or may not know that the tefillin have 4 portions within them. There are 4 paragraphs of the Torah that are in the tefillin. These 4 paragraphs are 4 paragraphs that mention the commandment to put on tefillin, so they all make it into the tefillin. By the way, the mezuzah has 2 paragraphs. Why? Because there are 2 paragraphs in the Torah that mention the mezuzah. So the mezuzah has 2 paragraphs, those 2 paragraphs. Tefillin has 4. Okay, we're not going to get into that right now. Now, even though both the head tefillin and the hand tefillin both have 4 portions, the same 4 portions, there is a interesting, significant difference between the head tefillin and the hand tefillin. And that you could see that meets the eye. And that is that in the hand tefillin, there's only 1 box. There's only 1 opening. The tefillin are essentially boxes. There's 1 box that you put in 1 piece of parchment that includes all 4 sections. When it comes to the head tefillin is completely different. It's not 1 box. You see, next time you see tefillin, you will see that the head tefillin is 4 separate compartments. So the question is, the first question is meets the eye. It's the first time you look at it, is you say, how come the hand tefillin is 1 box and the head tefillin is 4 boxes? It's not just random. It's not because we have to spice things up and make some change. So there's a very interesting Kabbalistic, Chassidic interpretation, and it's brilliant. Honestly, I haven't seen it till I think I saw it the first time 2 years ago, or a few years ago. Put many years after I began to put on tefillin, and I didn't understand how come nobody ever told this to me. So the idea is as follows: we know that the head tefillin is placed on the head. It's supposed to affect the mind. The hand tefillin, it says in the Torah, place these words on your heart. We don't put it on the heart, we put it on the hand next to the heart, okay? So, because it says tie it on your hand, but it says these words, so we're placing it on the hand, on the arm, next to the heart. So the head tefillin represents the mind, and the heart tefillin, and the hand tefillin represents the heart. Okay, once we understand that, now we understand why the head tefillin is 4 and the hand tefillin is 1. Because that's the difference between the mind and heart. And we have to understand that there's a difference between the way the mind functions and the heart functions. And the tefillin is just an expression about that. And let's think about this. What is the idea of the mind? What is the function of the mind? What is the mind supposed to do? The mind is supposed to analyze. And the only way you can analyze is by breaking things into details. You have an overwhelming picture. You could never grasp it. The way you grasp it is by taking it apart. Every component has to be analyzed separately and independently, and that's how the mind functions, and that's how you get a desired intellectual result, right? For example, let's say there's something that an experience that I have to approach. I have mixed feelings. I don't know, should I do it? Should I not do it? So what is the mind going to do? The mind says, let's analyze it. Right? The heart says, listen to my gut. We'll get to the heart in a minute. But the mind says, let's analyze it. What happens when I analyze it? What do I say? I don't say this is good or bad, right? When someone says this is good or bad, they're not using the mind, they're using the heart. What do I mean? The mind says, well, there's some details that are good and some details that are bad. There's pros and cons, right? Should I take my new job? Should I move? Should I sell my old house and buy a new house? Should I move to Florida? Should I go to Europe? Right? If you have an intellectual approach, the job of the mind is to look at every aspect of the equation independently, analyze it, take it apart. Then you'll see your pros and cons. You'll see that there's a mixed bag. Some details are good, some are bad, some are neutral, and some are just annoying. And then you can analyze every detail separately, and then you get your intellectual decision. That's why the mind, it has to divide it into four. Why the number four is another question. Let's do slowly. The point here is the mind breaks things into details. That's why the head tefillin, every portion is its own compartment, because the whole idea of the mind is to break things apart and analyze the differences and analyze the components that create the whole. Okay. What is the heart? Emotion doesn't work that way. Emotion does not see details. Emotion sees generality. For example, let's say I come home. This happens to me almost every day. And my daughter asks me, do you love me? True story, every night. Do you love me? I don't know. Maybe she has a bad memory. She doesn't remember from yesterday. I don't know what it is. If I say, I love you 97%, do you think she'll be happy? No. Not only because she wants the 100%. That's not the point. The point is because you cannot love somebody 97%. If you love somebody 97%, it means you're not using your heart, you're using your mind. Because you're analyzing, you're looking at details. You're making a calculation of whether or not this relationship is beneficial for me. And you typed in all the data and you crunched all the numbers, and the number that was spit out was 97%. The way the heart works, if you hate somebody, you hate the person completely. If you love somebody, you love the person completely. That's why love is blinding, because love doesn't let you look at the details. Now, what should you do in your life? Should you apply your mind, apply the heart? That's already a separate question. Then we have to put on tefillin, let the mind affect the heart. That's already detailed. We're going to get to that later. I'm just saying, why is it that the tefillin, the head tefillin has 4 compartments? The hand tefillin has 1 compartment, even though they have the same thing inside. Because that tells you that your mind and your heart work differently. They speak different languages. They don't like this. They don't respond to the same stimuli. The mind wants to see details. The heart does not want to see details. And that's why, by the way, if you're speaking to somebody and the person says, this idea or this person or this philosophy is 100% wrong, and I am 100% right, that's a wonderful position to take, but that's not an intellectual position. It's an emotional position, which is okay. Emotion is very important. I'm not attacking emotion. I'm just saying, if it's 100% and 100%, it's not intelligence. Intelligence, by definition, has the ability to say, some details are good, some details are more problematic, some I like, some I don't. That's the mind. So this is just by way of introduction before we even start analyzing the details of the tefillin. And again, I'm trying to derive what this means for us in our spiritual life, which we're headed there. But just to start, the mind and the heart is the head tefillin and the hand tefillin, and that idea of the way the mind works and the way the heart works and how they work so differently, by the way, which is why we spoke about this yesterday when we did some Tuesday, we did some Kabbalah, why there's sometimes a breakdown of communication. Because sometimes I'm having a conversation with you, you're speaking intellectually, I'm speaking emotionally, or vice versa. I'm speaking emotionally, you're speaking intellectually. And we can't communicate because we're speaking a different language, because you're trying to analyze and says, right? Let's say, I don't know, you come home, your wife comes home, your spouse comes home from work, And she said, I got into a fight with my boss. So if I start saying, well, on one hand, you're right. On the other hand, your boss is right. It's good. That is the good response if you're having an intellectual conversation. But it's likely that at that moment, it's not supposed to be an intellectual conversation. It's supposed to be the person wants to be felt emotionally. So the point of the matter is, before we even start speaking, we have to figure out: what's the word? Are we on the same channel? So that's the first idea. Mind, heart, they work differently. That's introduction. That was interesting. Now we start getting into details. Bear with me for 2-3 minutes. It's going to be boring, but like I said, it's law. It's technical, and there's people who love spirituality, don't like Judaism's obsession with the details of the law. What they're missing is that the details of the law actually capture very deep spiritual ideas, and that's what I'm going to try to show. And I'm very excited about this. So I hope you give me at least 2-3 minutes to talk about the technical quote unquote laws, and then we'll see how it reflects a deeper truth. Okay, so I'm reading the Shema. You probably know it by heart, but if not, I'll read it to you. I just need 1 or 2 verses here that are relevant, 1 or 2 verses that are relevant to what I want to say. If you have an art scroll, it's on page 974, 975. Verse 8, very famous verse, verse 8. You know what? I'll open it up on the screen so everybody can see it. We live in 21st century. The whole Zoom and the whole internet was really just created so we could study Torah. So we should take advantage of the options that are available to us, because that's why they were created. Okay, Hero Israel, you know these verses, you heard it before. Hero Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is our one. I'm skipping down to the Shema, verse 8. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your heart, and they shall be for ornaments between your eyes. Now we know that the people who rejected the oral Torah, the Sadducees, actually put the tefillin between their eyes on their nose. The rabbis understand that they have a tradition that it doesn't mean between the eyes, it means on your head, but it means in middle of your head, between your eyes. Okay. It looks like an innocent verse. Tie them as a sign between your hands, that's your hand tefillin, and place them, and they shall be for ornaments, for a sign between your eyes. Totafos, ornaments. Totafos is a very strange word, by the way. Totafot is a strange word. Nobody can figure out what the word means. Rashi says it's a combination of 2 words, tat and pat, which is 2 different languages, and it means 2 and 2. And basically, it's an allusion to the fact that there's 4 compartments in the head tefillin, as we mentioned. So totafot is not a Hebrew word, according to Rashi. It really comes from Rabbi Akiva in the Medrash. Tat there's 2 languages in, I forget which language, which Afriki, an African language, and another language, which I forgot. And Rashi says that totafot is 2 words, tat pat, which is 2 and 2. And that's because there were 4 compartments in the tefillin. Okay, but that's not really what I want to get at. Here he goes. And they shall be as an ornament between your eyes. Hebrew totafot. These are the tefillin of the head, and because of the number of the scriptural sections contained in them, namely 4, they are called totafot. Totafot. For tat in Coptic means 2. Pat in Afriki, I have no idea how to pronounce this. Phrygian, maybe that's a word, I don't know. Also means 2. That's from the Talmud and Sanhedrin. And there you go, the word totafot. Okay, but I'm not really interested in that's not what I'm trying to focus on. What I want to focus on is something simply as, what is the commandment? What is the verb used for the commandment? So if you analyze the hand tefillin, ukshartam, you shall tie, you shall bind. What's the mitzvah? To bind. What's the bind? The act of tying. When it comes to the head tefillin, what is the mitzvah? And they shall be for ornaments. What's the verb? What is the verb? Is there a verb? And they shall be. Is there a verb? I'm looking for a verb. What's the answer? There's no verb. Which means the commandment is not to do something. The commandment is that they shall be, that the tefillin shall sit on your head. There's nothing you have to do. Okay. What is the ramification of the fact that the hand tefillin has a verb and the head tefillin doesn't have a verb? Sorry for getting into the semantics. Now I'm going to get into more technical. Technically speaking, The mitzvah to put on hand tefillin is just 1 moment. You tie the tefillin, you did the mitzvah. Now, you're going to wear tefillin for the next 5 hours. The hand tefillin is not a mitzvah. Doesn't matter. I can wear it for 1 second or 10 hours. The mitzvah is the act of tying. So the hand tefillin, as from the perspective, you'll see things are going to change later with the head tefillin. But the hand tefillin, the mitzvah is to tie. It's a one-time thing. You tie it, that's all. Afterward, if I wear tefillin for an hour, it's not 60 mitzvot. It's 1 mitzvah, which took when? When was the moment of the mitzvah? When's the moment of the commandment? The moment of tying. That's the hand tefillin, because there's a verb, ukshartam, you shall tie. Okay. Now let's go to the head tefillin. There's no verb. What does it say? They shall be. What does that mean? As long as they're on your head, it's a mitzvah. You wear tefillin for an hour, you have a continuous mitzvah for an hour. You wear a mitzvah for 10 hours, the mitzvah continues for 10 hours. By the way, in the olden days, in biblical times, they had small tefillin. They wore tefillin from sunrise to sunset. It was like I'm wearing a suit. You wear tefillin a whole day. And as long as they're on your head, it's a mitzvah. So the hand tefillin, it's only a one-time mitzvah. The head tefillin is a continuous mitzvah. How do I know? Because that's what the verse says. The verse says there's a verb, ukshartam, tie. The mitzvah is to tie. Once it's tied, the mitzvah has been completed. As opposed to they shall be, what are you going to say? Once I put it on my head, the mitzvah is completed? No, they shall be means continuous. So this is a very important distinction. And by the way, there's halachic distinctions about this. I don't want to get into too details, but there's many layers of distinction that derive from the fact that it's 1 mitzvah or many mitzvahs. Okay, that's stage 1. Then I'm going to give you 1 more stage, and then we're going to get to the mysticism. So don't get too afraid. Okay, it's not turning into a Talmud class, at least not yet. Another few minutes, and we'll get a little bit more mystical.
Rabbi, can it be figurative, like you have those commandments between your eyes all the time?
Yeah, you're heading there.
Without putting it on.
But what about the hand? How come the hand you don't have continuous?
No, not the hand, because hand is just the executor.
The hand is the heart. What about the heart? Very good. You're onto something.
And then
don't go anywhere. Don't sign off. Don't go to a different Zoom. Stay right here. We need your help.
And I also had a question. Is it 2 separate pieces of paper on the head, or
four separate pieces of paper?
What about the hand? Also 4 separate?
No, 1 piece of paper, 4 paragraphs.
Okay, thank you.
Rabbi, I have 4 paragraphs. The emotions tie it all up together, right? Emotion takes 4 different details and puts it all together. I see the person not as a composite of many details. If I love you, I love all of you. Yeah, but you have some annoying characteristics. But if I'm in love, I'm not going to see it. If I see it and I say, well, I love you 97.5%, then it's a wonderful thing, but I'm using my heart, I'm using my mind, not my heart. What should you use when you're in a relationship? Call me back later, we'll talk about it. Yes, Jill.
Okay, Rabbi, does that mean that if you're at a state where you have those 4 ready to go, that you have to be ready at all times to ask questions, to investigate, to be in that state of alertness?
That's good. Yes.
So the other way, you're not asked to be emotional all the time, but you're asked to engage intellectually at all times.
Yolan, very good. Yeah, very good. I'm going to help. Yeah, that's excellent. Excellent. So what Jill is saying and what Vicky said, but I tried to have her say it later, but essentially what you're saying is as follows. What did I tell you? I told you that the mitzvah of the head tefillin is on the mind constantly, is to be on your head constantly. The hand tefillin, which represents the heart, is not constant, it's just a one-time thing. So what are you telling me? And you're correct. According to Kabbalah, according to certainly Hasidic philosophy, a person could control their thoughts. I'm asking you a question. Could you control your thoughts? Could you control your emotions? Simple question. All right. Your mother probably told you control yourself. My mother would say, hold your horses. I have no idea what that means because I had no horses. My mother would always say, hold your horses. Assuming your mother probably told you control yourself. I'm asking you a question. Could you control yourself? Could I control what I think about and what I feel about? What I feel? It's a very simple question, but a very important question. The Hasidic Kabbalistic answer is You could control what you think about. In other words, you can't control what falls into your head. I could be sitting in this room trying to think about the Torah, and a thought will fall into my head about, the stock market, right? I'm davening, I'm praying, and all of a sudden, a thought will fall in about what am I eating for lunch? There's a funny story. It's a very sad story. I'll tell you the sad story. The sad story is once upon a time, there was a Jew who was going to go to court. He had a court date with a Gentile. And it was a very serious claim. So he comes to the rabbi before davening, before the prayer, and he says, Rabbi, what am I going to do? That Gentile is going to make claim number A. How am I going to respond? The rabbi says, I have a good idea. If that guy says number A, you respond B, whatever it was. Wonderful idea. He was so happy he came to shul, he got the advice. He starts praying. Yeah, I don't know if they'll get it. It's a joke, especially if you come to shul, you'll get the joke. So the guy's praying, Mincha, he's praying the Amidah, the most important prayer. He's focusing, thinking about God, praying, finishes the prayer. He comes into the rabbi. Yeah, Rabbi, but if I say B, that Gentile is going to counter with C. What am I going to do then? The rabbi says, don't worry, that he's not going to think of it. He doesn't pray. He doesn't go to shul and pray, right? Because when you're praying in shul, that's when all the ideas fall in your head, right? That's the joke. So the point is, if the Gentile doesn't come to shul to pray the Amidah, he's never going to think of that. What I'm trying to say is like this. What I'm trying to say is we cannot control what falls into our head. That's out of our control. But we could control at that point, once something falls in our head, we could control, do we want to think about it or do we want to think about something else? By the way, what you cannot do is you can't stop thinking. I have no idea that I see advertising for meditation. You're going to go, we're going to stop thinking. You can empty the mind. I don't know what that means. I'm not attacking any specific spiritual. What am I call it? Spiritual tradition. But the point is, from the perspective of the Kabbalah, you cannot control what falls into your head. You're always going to be thinking. You may be thinking about nothing, but you're always going to be thinking about something. You have a choice what to direct your mind. Just because thought falls into my head, I don't have to embrace it. I could shift my mind to something else. That you could do. Hang on just 1 second, Jill. What you cannot do is you can't control your heart. I don't like broccoli. What are you going to say? Force yourself to love broccoli? I don't like it. What are you going to do? So this is what Jill and Vicky said. The head tefillin represents that the awareness of God, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad, the Lord is our God, Lord is one. The awareness of God should constantly be on your mind because you have the ability to control what you think about. And you could make sure that you could put in the effort to constantly be aware of holiness and goodness and the spark of God within every creation, et cetera, whatever you want to think about, could be constant. The hand tefillin is not constant because you cannot control your heart. What could you do? We'll get to that in a second. But you guys are absolutely correct on the double, on the mark, that's the difference in the heart and the mind. But again, we're not done yet. We still have another few steps to the journey. Go ahead, Jill.
Okay. There's a problem with the contamination of the emotions and the mind, or intellectual mind. It sort of, sometimes it just catches you unaware and you don't know you're being infected.
Correct.
Sometimes you're being enlightened, but more often it's the other way.
Correct.
So the application of your intellect is not always sufficient to deal with that intrusion.
Agreed. It's very difficult. One of the most difficult things to do for a person, we discussed this, we didn't discuss in these terms, but when I was 14, we had a Hasidic teacher, and he taught me the words, not the words, but the concepts of being objective and subjective. And the idea of making sure that my intellectual analysis is objective and not subjective is very, very difficult. It's very difficult, even if I'm trying. Let's say I'm a judge. Let's say I'm a journalist. Let's say my job is to think objectively, right? It is a very difficult thing for people to do. And you need a lot of soul searching. And not always could you be completely successful if you're talking about a matter that you care about. If it's a matter that you don't care about, you can be objective. But if it's something that affects your emotions, it is very difficult to be objective. And this is a whole nother discussion. What is the relationship between the heart and the mind, and how are they supposed to interact? Wonderful discussion, but we're not even there yet. We're more elementary. We're trying to figure out, am I in control? Do I have any power? So the first step, as you pointed out correctly, that if you say the head tefillin have to be on your head continuously, what that's telling you is that God is telling you, you can always make the choice to have the awareness of the divine, to have the awareness of holiness, no matter where you are in your day, no matter who you're interacting with, they can be placed on your head. Remember, a commandment is also empowerment. If God says you have to do it, it means you can do it, right? So if the mitzvah is, if we said the mitzvah of having the head tefillin on your head is continuous, that means it's in your power to continuously have the awareness of God wherever you do, in whatever you're doing and how you're doing it. Okay. What about the heart? The heart is much more tricky. And I can't decide how I'm going to feel. At least not in stage one. We may get to stage two, but in stage one, I can't decide how I'm going to feel. So what does the Torah say? Exactly, and I didn't think about this earlier, but exactly what my mother told me. And what my mother said is brilliant. Oh, I have to call her up. This is brilliant advice. What did she say? She said, hold your horses. What does hold your horses mean? I don't know. What I think she meant is tie them up. The horses want to run, tie them, which means control yourself. Don't let your impulses take over your behavior, right? That's the act of tying. That's why the hand tefillin, which represents the heart, God can't tell you what to feel, at least not in stage one. So what God is saying, tie it, make sure that those words of the Torah are on your heart in the sense that it's holding your heart at bay. It's controlling it, it's directing it, but it's not transforming it, because my heart wants to go and rob a bank. Tie it on your heart, keep your emotions in check. That's why the mitzvah is the tying, not the constantly being, but the tying. That's the verb, that's the action. Keep your emotions in check, or like my mother told me, hold your horses. Okay, that is step one. Now we go to step two, and only the Talmud can figure out step two. Are you ready? Even though I told you that the mitzvah of hand tefillin is just one moment, you put on the hand tefillin, you did the verb of tying, and then you're done. So how come when you went to shul last time, you saw people wearing the hand tefillin the whole davening, right? The head tefillin, I understand. You want to leave it on as long as possible because that's what the Torah says. But the hand tefillin, the mitzvah, is just one moment. So put on the hand tefillin, take it off, then put on the head tefillin, leave it on. Oh, you can't do that. Here's a catch. There's a catch. What's the catch? What's the catch? There's always a catch. You got to be careful. There's always a catch. What's the catch? It's also right there in verse 8. And you shall bind them for a sign upon your hand, and they shall be in the plural. So simply, they shall be, the simple interpretation is vehayu, they shall be. We mean all four parchments. All four parchments, the plural, should be on your head. But that's not what the Talmud says. The Talmud Tractate Menachot, the Talmud says like this, vehayu, they shall be, refers to both pairs of tefillin. And they say, therefore, you know what this means? As long as they are between your eyes, meaning on your head, you must have they. They must be plural. You must have two pairs. You must have hand tefillin and head tefillin. Okay, what's the result? The result is that I wear tefillin for an hour. Why? The head tefillin is a continuous mitzvah. The hand tefillin is not a continuous mitzvah. So why do I have my hand tefillin on for longer than the first moment? It's indirect. It's an indirect obligation. Because I have my head tefillin, that's why I have to have my hand tefillin.
So you can control your heart with your mind.
Indirectly. God cannot tell you control your feelings. Impossible. My feelings are natural. I like broccoli. What are you going to tell me to do? Right? I don't like this person. What are you going to tell me to do? I can't. On the first step, there's no commandment to control you, to constantly have your heart in line with God. It's impossible. But just like in the law, indirectly, you will always have your hand tefillin on. What's the deeper message here? The deeper message is, if you control your mind, if you're always focused on the right things, if you saturate your mind with the knowledge of God, if you saturate your mind with holiness and spirituality, as a result, indirectly, it may also trickle down to your heart. So could God, so in the final analysis, could I control my heart? Not directly, indirectly, over time. If I do what I could do, which is control my mind, keep the tefillin on your head constantly, that isn't my power. If you do that, it trickles down, and then you know something, oh, as a result of the head tefillin, the hand tefillin have to be on. Not directly, indirectly. That's signaling something about controlling the heart and affecting the heart. And that is that if I put myself in a positive environment, let's say I don't like you, what am I going to do? Could I decide to love you all of a sudden? No. But what happens if every day I take an exercise, which is I'm going to think good thoughts about you? Over time, you train yourself to see the good in the person, to think good things about the person. Over time, that's going to affect how your heart, how your heart feels. So could you directly control your heart? No. Indirectly? Yes. All that you wouldn't know from the verse unless you have a Talmudic analysis that seems to be just a specific law, which is so strange. If the Torah wanted you to wear the hand tefillin the whole time, just say, wear the hand tefillin the whole time. No, we don't say that. We say, head tefillin the whole time. Hand tefillin? No, you don't have to wear it the whole time. Only the first moment. Oh, but by the way, if you want to wear the head tefillin the whole time, you also have to wear the hand tefillin the whole time. Why can't you just say this thing straight? The answer is because it's signaling a deep truth. What's it signaling? You cannot control your heart the whole time. You can tie it, you can keep it at bay, but you can't control how you feel. But you could control what you think about. Indirectly, over time, if you think about good things, it's going to affect your heart as well. That is, I think, an absolutely beautiful idea because it's true. It tells us about ourselves, tells us how we can affect ourselves, but it also shows us how the nuances of Talmudic law are not just nuances that are reflecting technical matters of either legalities or, in this case, of a ritual of exactly how we should do the mitzvah, but every detail has a deeper spiritual meaning. So this is point number one. This has been fun. Thank you for joining. Any questions or comments, please share. Otherwise, we continue. Okay, we say it every year, but I'm going to say it again because it's important. So now that I told you something new, I don't think I said the past thing. I don't think I said it before. So I fulfill the obligation of saying something new. Now I'm going to say something that I say every year, but I don't mind to say it. You know why? Because it's never supposed to get boring. You know how I know? Because the Torah tells us to say it twice a day. The Torah tells us to say the Shema twice a day. So if the Torah tells us to say the Shema twice a day, I could say this twice a year or once a year. Because every day it has to be like new. By the way, that's what the verse says. If the verse says in the Shema, I'm looking at verse 6, and these words which I command you this day, these words which I command you today. The question is, what did Moshe command us that day? Moshe wasn't commanding us that day. Moshe told us the Torah 40 years before. Says Rashi, beautiful, beautiful Rashi, which I command you today. They should not appear to you as an antiquated edict, which no one cares about, but as a new one, which everyone hastens to read. Okay, the word Yutkema means an edict, a royal edict with which comes in writing. It's sifri. Then there's another source, which another medrash which says this a little bit differently. It says, every day they should be in your eyes as new. Right? That also ties into emotion, heart, and mind, but maybe I'll do that in a second. We'll get to that in a second. But the bottom line is that the Torah tells us the same truth every day. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one, and every day you have to experience that as new. How could you do that? Let us talk about that for 60 seconds. How could it be that something I heard as a kid, Shema Yisrael, every day, twice a day, and every day it says new? How could that be? After a while, you get bored of it. Right? Imagine every day you go and buy the same newspaper, not the same publication, but you take the newspaper of what's today? What's today? I don't know what today's date is. July 22nd, 1969, and every single day you read that same newspaper. After a while, you get bored, right? What's this idea of reading the same Torah, the same verses every day? So there are all kinds of interpretations. I change, I don't change. I'm going to give a basic interpretation that ties into mind and heart, because right now we're on the mind and heart theme. What is the big difference between mind and heart? A very important difference is that the mind always needs something new to stimulate it. That's why I try, even though we've been doing this class for, I don't know, 15 years. I try, I'm going to repeat old things, but I try every class to say at least something new. Because otherwise you're going to go home and you're going to say, what happened? I've been hearing this the last 15 years. I need to hear something new. The mind needs to hear something new. If you pick up the novel and you read the same novel every day, you're going to get bored of it. The heart is very different. The heart does not need anything new. To the contrary, the heart will respond in some cases to things that are old better than to things that are new. And the best example, you have a musician here, the best example is music. With music, it's very clear. The melodies you connect to the most are the melodies you heard in the past. It's very hard to fall in love, quote unquote, with a song the first time you hear it. It's possible. But even if you do, it's not going to be as deep as the music that you heard many times. How is it? How come when I go to the library, every time I need a new book, when I go play my playlist on to listen to my music, I'm fighting with my kids because they want to hear all the music that came out in 2020. I'm like, I don't know what you're talking about. If it came out after 1990, I don't want to hear it, right? You want to go back to the past and you want to hear the music of the past because why? The Hasidic interpretation is because if you're connecting emotionally, it doesn't need to be new. So how am I going to get to the idea that the words of the Shema, the Lord is our God, the relationship with God is not an old-fashioned story? It's only an old-fashioned story if you're approaching it from the intellectual perspective alone. But if it's not just the intellectual perspective, and like Jill alluded to, you have to allow the interaction between the mind and the heart. It's this week's parsha all over the place. Moshe says, we say it in the Aleinu, it comes in this week's parsha as well. Be'adata hayom, you should know today, v'hashevota levavecha, and take it to your heart. There's the stage of knowing, that's the knowledge of the mind, and then there's taking it to your heart. And if you take it to your heart and it affects the heart, then you're going to get a situation where it's new and exciting. Okay, this is all by way of introduction of why. This is all just to give me permission to repeat what I said in the past. Okay, so here we go. What is the most important statement in Judaism, and what is it telling us? Okay, so let's read the most important statement. It's so important that it's a mitzvah to say it twice a day, in the morning, at night. What is the mitzvah? Either the whole paragraph, according to some opinions, it's the whole paragraph, verse 4 to verse 9. According to some opinions, it's the first sentence. It's the thing you do nothing less every morning and every night. You say the first sentence, Hear, O Israel, the Lord is our God, the Lord is one. What is this verse telling us? And it's telling us so many things. There's so many truths, so many Kabbalistic truths piled into one slogan. So I'm just going to talk about one perspective, but there are many more perspectives. You have to get to the root of monotheism. This root, the oneness, is the root of monotheism, is really the source of monotheism. But to understand monotheism, you also have to understand paganism. And what's the root of paganism? And what is monotheism coming to battle when it battles with paganism? What did Abraham reject in paganism that led him to monotheism? So what's essential paganism? You know, people drive around and they have all different idols, and they have 10 idols, or 20 or 30, doesn't matter. What's the difference if I have one God or 10 gods? It's a difference. What's the difference? Who cares? Does it matter how many gods I have? Because seemingly the more the merrier. If gods are good, that you have many gods is even better. What's so terrible? You have all different gods. What's so bad? And why is in the Bible paganism is synonymous with immorality, right? Paganism, a guy believes in two gods. What's the end of the world? The end of the world is going to happen. Doesn't mean he's going to rob a bank tomorrow. He believes in two gods. What's so bad? I have one God, he has two. What's the problem? Does it mean he has to essentially be immoral? Yet the pagan cultures were totally immoral. What's the connection between paganism as an idea and immorality as a practice? And again, I'm not saying today every pagan is immoral, but the pagan cultures historically were very immoral.
Who are you to judge that they are immoral?
That's a very good question. You now are touching the point of, is there even such a thing of morality? Right? I think it's immoral. So thank you. Thank you for that. I'm going to start from right there. If there are many gods, there are many truths. If there are many truths, there's no one truth. If there's no one truth, then anything is allowed. Murder is allowed. Why? I say murder is bad. Who am I? The other guy says murder is good. I say theft is bad. Why? Because my God, my morality, God is morality. My morality said theft is bad. Well, you find you want to rob a bank? No problem. Go to the supermarket, buy a god that allows theft, and you rob the bank, right? So if there's many gods, many sources of power, many sources of influence, and therefore there are many moralities, if there are many moralities, there are no moralities. Right? What's wrong? What is not allowed? What's immoral? Give me an example of something immoral. Murder, I'll find a God that thinks murder is good. Right? There's not one source of truth that's binding on everybody. Besides the fact that my God doesn't mind if I kill you because you believe in a different God. So that divides us. But essentially what it's basically saying is, if there are multiple sources of power, there are multiple sources of truth, multiple sources of morality. There is no one morality. If there's no one morality, there is no morality whatsoever. Okay? Now this is a big philosophical idea. Many people, especially today, disagree with it, but I'm telling you monotheism as opposed to paganism. So what is Judaism saying? Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Lord is our God, Lord is one, means that there is only one source of truth. There is only one source of morality. There's only one source of everything. Now, when you look at the world, you don't see oneness. What do you see? You see multiplicity. You see good, you see bad, you see pain, you see suffering, you see pleasure. There's multiplicity. And you see all kinds of things. And the good things happen in the world and bad things happen in the world. And that's why you would be excused to believe that there are many sources of power in this world. At least two, right? Paganism is a lot, but it starts from two. It starts from division. It starts from there's the good and there's the bad. And what Shema Yisrael, what Shema is telling us is that everything we see, even what appears to us as negative, ultimately comes from the unity of God. Everything starts with God. And therefore, what is the ramification of that? The ramification of that is that everything in this world will actually come together, eventually will come together as a puzzle to express one truth. In other words, even the negativity is telling us a story and part of the oneness. How could the negativity be part of the oneness? Because why did God create evil in the world? God created evil in the world for us so we can have free choice. We can overcome it, essentially be strengthened by it, because if we have to overcome it, we're strengthening ourselves. And so in the final analysis, the purpose of the negativity is for goodness, right? So when we look around the world, we say, yes, we see multiplicity. But the true idea of Jewish monotheism is, since everything comes from God, ultimately everything will be united. We will see how the Lord is one, how all the contradictions in the universe, in the world, in society are really here to express one truth. And that's the depth of the idea of monotheism. Now, the same thing, what's true in the world is also true within our heart. Because in our heart, if we look at our heart, what do we see? If I have to ask me, I'm not going to ask you, I'm not going to put you on the spot, but me, am I a good person or am I a bad person? The true answer, if I'm being honest with you, I would have to say I'm schizophrenic. Sometimes I am very altruistic. Sometimes I want to do good. And sometimes I don't care if the entire world drops dead. I just care about myself. They say a story about a poor Jew, but he was very clever. And he probably wasn't a real person. Probably is just folklore. But the story is like this, that there was a very wealthy miser. And the miser would invite people to his home for dinner, because you're a Jewish person, you have to do the mitzvah of inviting guests. And if you're going to invite guests, if you're not going to invite guests, you're going to be an outcast in the community. So this wealthy guy always invited guests for dinner. The problem was he was such a miser, he could not stand anybody enjoying his money. So he came up with a plan. And the plan was that the guests would come for dinner, they would serve the course, and the guests did not have time to eat, because the host would pepper him with questions. Where you come from? Vilna. What's going on in Vilna? How's the stock market? What's the price of cheese? And just pepper him with questions. And the guy would be answering. Meanwhile, the host is eating and the guest is talking. And then the servant came and took away the food. The course is over. And that's how it went, 3 courses. The host was full. The guest went home hungry. The miser was happy because he invited guests, and he didn't have to spend any money on the food, and everybody was happy except for the poor guest who went home hungry. So one day Harshala says, I'm going to set this miser straight. So Herschel knocks on the door. I'm coming for dinner. Oh, guest. I love guests. So the host invites Herschel in. Herschel sits down. They put down a plate of soup, the first course. He says, where are you from? He says, where am I from? I'm from, I don't know, where were people from in those days? I'm from Vilna. You're from Vilna. Ah, my best friend isn't from Vilna, says the host. Tell me, how's Yankel doing? The Herschel says, Yankel is dead. He died. The host goes into a shock. His best friend died. He had no idea. There was no Instagram those days. So the host is in shock. Meanwhile, Herschel's eating the first course. He ate the first course, totally full, totally happy. Fine, they bring the second course. The host just finally manages to overcome his pain. And he says, you're from Vilna. Tell me, how's my other friend? My other friend Zalman. Your other friend Zalman. Zalman died. Meanwhile, the host goes into shock. They bring the second course. Herschel eats the second course. He's very happy. They bring the third course. Same story. How's my friend Yassel? Yassel died. He eats the third course. Finally, the host realizes that someone's playing something. And he says, I don't understand. What happened? Everyone's dying in Vilna. So Herschel says, you don't understand. When I'm hungry, the whole world is dead. Right? So nothing else matters. So that's how we are. Sometimes we're altruistic. We care about other people. Sometimes the whole world is dead. We don't care. I'm hungry. I'm just concerned about myself. So that's the positivity and the negativity within my own heart. What does Judaism tell us? Both the positive and the negative are for one purpose. Hashem Echad. Both the positive and the negative are for one purpose. Even the negative tendencies and impulses are here to challenge the godly soul, to challenge the holy part of soul, to overcome it, and eventually, as we discussed earlier, to overcome it and eventually channel its strength, the strength of the negative soul and the negative soul to the holiness of God. And in other words, and that's what we say in the Shema, actually, we say in the Shema, if I share the screen, we say in the Shema, you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart. B'chal levavcha, with all your heart. The Sage says with all your heart. It says levavcha with two letters, bays. You can write it libcha, you could say levavcha. It's written with two vases. Says the Mishnah, you have to love your heart you have to love God with all your heart, with both inclinations, with the good inclination and with the bad inclination. Ultimately, every part of self, both the positive and the negative, are part of one story. And that's a result of Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. The Lord is our God, the Lord is one. If God is one, everything comes from God. If everything comes from God, both the positive and negative in the world, both the positive and negative in my heart, then ultimately, if everything originated as one, then everything will ultimately combine to one, and we will realize that even the negative experiences within our heart, with even the negative experiences in our life, are here for a positive purpose to intensify our relationship to God and to holiness. So this, ladies and gentlemen, is the story in short. We're going to conclude a few minutes early today. Why not? And hopefully you enjoy it. I enjoyed this very much. So thank you for joining. Any comments, questions, jokes, please share. Otherwise, we'll see each other in good health.
So it seems like there's the natural connection to you shall love then.
Yes. So there is a state of Shema Yisrael is the awareness. Shema is listen. But in biblical Hebrew, as in Yiddish, listen doesn't mean to hear with your ear. Listen means pay attention. Listen means focus. And when you focus on the unity of God, ultimately it's going to go into your heart as well, which is an idea. It's in the Kabbalah all over the place, but nobody says it as well as Maimonides, because the question is, there's a commandment to love God. Could you command to love God? Which is essentially the question I said in the beginning. Could you control your heart? And the answer is you can't control your heart. So how could there be a commandment to love God? So there's all different types of answers. The answer Maimonides gives is that the answer Maimonides gives is that the answer Maimonides gives is that when you will meditate about the greatness of God, and Maimonides says, think about the beauty of the universe. Okay, so next time you study anything in science, you understand that that's part of understanding the mitzvah of loving God. When you will meditate about the greatness of God, over time, that will lead to the love of God. And you see that in the Shema. You move from Shema Yisrael, which is the intellectual awareness, which that is in you, very much in your hand, in your power, and then it trickles down to the heart over time, hopefully.
Thank you.
Thank you for coming, Charlotte. Thank you. See you, Shabbos. I will. Thank you.